The pink envelope landed on Micah Thompson's desk like a live grenade, its vibrant color triggering the same old wave of disgust that had defined his adult life. When he sliced it open expecting another plea from some charity he loathed, the words inside hit harder than any blow. Thank you for your generous sponsorship of Emmanuel Rivera's Rainbow Horizons initiative, the very symbol of everything Micah had spent years fearing and fighting against. His hands shook as he stared at the official letter from the foundation, the company logo of Thompson Financial staring back at him in crisp black ink. How had this happened? He never donated to anything rainbow, never clicked a single Pride link, and certainly never wrote a check to Emmanuel Rivera, the activist whose face had haunted news segments for months as the face of bold LGBTQ youth advocacy in New York. Micah pushed back from his mahogany desk in the corner office overlooking Manhattan's financial district, the late afternoon sun streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows that usually made him feel powerful. Today, they only amplified his panic. At 35, he had built a life of control. Top banker at one of the city's most conservative firms, weekly calls with his father back in Texas who still preached the old values, and a carefully curated image that kept whispers at bay. Pink envelopes had always been the enemy, tossed straight into the shredder with a muttered curse about agendas ruining families. Now this one had betrayed him. He grabbed his phone and dialed the foundation's number listed at the bottom, voice tight as he demanded to speak with someone in charge. The receptionist put him on hold while elevator music played, giving him too much time to remember the college roommate whose coming out had shattered their friendship and left Micah questioning everything he thought he knew about himself. He had buried that memory deep, along with the confusing nights that followed. The hold music cut off. Mr. Thompson, this is Sarah from Donor Relations. Your firm's matching program auto-approved the $10,000 contribution last quarter. Emmanuel Rivera himself wanted to thank you personally. Micah's stomach dropped. $10,000. Matching program. He had signed the paperwork months ago without reading the fine print, distracted by a merger deal. Now it had funded the man whose speeches Micah had once called dangerous on a late-night talk show. There must be a mistake, he snapped, pacing the office. I want it reversed immediately. Sarah's voice stayed polite but firm. I'm afraid corporate donations are non-refundable once allocated, sir. But Emmanuel is speaking at our upcoming gala. Perhaps you could attend and discuss it. He hung up, heart racing, and stared at the city skyline that suddenly felt smaller, more confining. This was not just money lost. It was a crack in the wall he had built around his life. The next morning, his assistant reminded him of the gala invitation already in his calendar, courtesy of the firm's community outreach requirement. Micah knew he had to go, if only to confront the situation head-on and maybe salvage his reputation. As he buttoned his crisp white shirt that evening, the mirror reflected a man who looked put together on the outside but felt like he was unraveling inside. The drive to the venue in Midtown was silent, his mind replaying every pink envelope he had ever destroyed. The gala ballroom buzzed with well-dressed donors and colorful banners celebrating youth empowerment. Micah kept to the edges, nursing a scotch and scanning for the exit. Then the lights dimmed for the keynote, and Emmanuel Rivera stepped onto the stage. Tall, with warm brown eyes and a confident stride that commanded the room, Emmanuel spoke about the kids the initiative had helped escape homelessness and rejection. His voice carried genuine passion, not the anger Micah had imagined from afar. When Emmanuel mentioned a new major sponsor enabling expanded programs, the crowd applauded, and Micah felt eyes turn his way. He slipped out during the standing ovation, pulse pounding, but not before catching Emmanuel's gaze across the room, a spark of curiosity in those kind eyes that unsettled him more than any confrontation could. Back home in his sleek apartment, Micah poured another drink and opened his laptop, searching Emmanuel's name against his better judgment. Articles showed the activist's journey from a tough Chicago upbringing to leading change in New York, always with a smile that suggested he understood pain without letting it define him. Micah closed the tab quickly, but the image lingered. For the first time in years, the hatred felt less like armor and more like a weight he was tired of carrying. He tossed the pink envelope into the trash but hesitated before slamming the lid shut. Something had shifted, and he could not name it yet. The city lights outside his window seemed to pulse with questions he had avoided for too long. The following week dragged with meetings and market reports, but Micah could not shake the gala from his mind. He told himself it was just damage control, that showing up at the Rainbow Horizons open house would allow him to politely request his name be removed from future acknowledgments. The center sat in a renovated warehouse in Brooklyn, sunlight flooding through high windows onto walls covered in colorful artwork from the youth they served. Micah arrived in his usual suit, feeling out of place among the casual staff and laughing teenagers. Emmanuel greeted him at the door with a firm handshake and that same warm smile from the stage. "Mr. Thompson, I hoped you'd come. Your support means more than you know." Micah pulled his hand back quickly, muttering about a clerical error. Emmanuel listened without interruption, then offered a tour instead of arguments. They walked through classrooms where kids learned job skills, a counseling area filled with supportive posters, and a common room where laughter echoed. One boy, no older than 17, shared how the program had helped him after his parents kicked him out for being gay. Micah's chest tightened, memories of his own father's stern warnings about that lifestyle flashing unbidden. Emmanuel noticed the change in his posture and suggested they step outside for air. On the rooftop garden overlooking the East River, Emmanuel spoke softly about his own fears growing up, never pushing Micah to share. The conversation flowed surprisingly easy, touching on New York life, the pressures of public work, and even sports teams they both followed. Micah found himself laughing at a story about Emmanuel's failed attempt at basketball in college, the sound foreign in his own ears. For a moment, the pink envelopes felt less like threats and more like bridges he had burned too soon. But when Emmanuel mentioned hoping the sponsorship would continue, Micah stiffened. "I didn't choose this," he said sharply. "My firm did it automatically." Emmanuel nodded, eyes steady. "Choices have a way of finding us anyway. The kids here don't care how the money arrived. They just know it helps." The words landed heavy, stirring something Micah refused to examine. They parted with a promise to meet again for a follow-up on the donation logistics, and Micah drove home replaying the exchange. That night, a call from his father in Texas reminded him of the stakes. "Heard you're mixing with those groups now, son? Don't let the city soften you." Micah assured him it was business only, but the lie tasted bitter. Days turned into weeks of emails with the foundation, each one pulling Micah deeper. He started reading the impact reports Emmanuel sent, stories of young men finding courage to live openly. One evening, after a particularly grueling board meeting, Micah found himself at a coffee shop near the center, hoping for a quick glimpse of the work without committing. Emmanuel spotted him through the window and joined him uninvited, 2 lattes in hand. Their talk shifted from logistics to personal histories. Micah shared fragments of his Texas roots, the football scholarship that hid his confusion, the friend who had come out and been cut off. Emmanuel listened without judgment, sharing his own path to activism after losing a brother to suicide. The connection grew, subtle but undeniable, a shared understanding of carrying unseen burdens. Micah left the shop feeling lighter, yet terrified. Back at the office, a colleague joked about his new rainbow friends, and the old defensiveness surged. He buried himself in work, but the pink envelope from the center's thank you stack sat on his desk like a quiet challenge. When Emmanuel texted an invitation to a small fundraiser dinner, Micah surprised himself by accepting. The decision felt like the first real choice he had made in years, one that might lead somewhere he had always feared. The city hummed around him as he prepared, the skyline now a witness to the slow unraveling of walls he had built so carefully. The fundraiser dinner took place in a quiet Manhattan loft, string lights casting a soft glow over tables of donors and youth ambassadors. Micah arrived early, nerves buzzing under his tailored jacket, telling himself it was purely professional. Emmanuel welcomed him with a genuine smile, introducing him to several teens who shared their stories with quiet strength. One young man spoke about reconciling with his family after years of hiding, and Micah felt a pang of envy mixed with guilt. The evening flowed with toasts to progress, and Micah found himself contributing more than he planned, his voice steady as he described the financial impact his firm could expand. Later, over dessert, Emmanuel pulled him aside on the balcony. The night air carried the distant sounds of the city, and their conversation turned deeper. Micah admitted the hatred he had carried for anything that challenged his father's worldview, the pink envelopes symbolizing a threat he could not name. Emmanuel shared how fear had once kept him silent too, until he chose to turn it into action. No pressure, just honesty that chipped away at Micah's armor. For the first time, Micah felt seen without being exposed. They exchanged numbers for follow-up, and the drive home left Micah questioning every boundary he had set. Work the next day brought its own storm. A major client pulled funding after hearing rumors of Micah's involvement with the center, whispering about image risks. His boss called him in, eyes narrow. "Keep it clean, Thompson. We're not in the business of causes." Micah defended the sponsorship as strategic community outreach, but the words felt hollow. That evening, his phone rang with his father's voice laced with disappointment. "Son, people are talking. You know what that looks like back home." The pressure mounted, family expectations clashing with the new connections forming. Micah spent sleepless hours staring at the ceiling, internal voices warring between the life he knew and the one peeking through. He visited the center again, this time anonymously at first, observing from the sidelines as Emmanuel led a workshop on self-advocacy. The kids' resilience mirrored something Micah had lost long ago. When Emmanuel noticed him and invited him to join a casual group discussion, Micah hesitated but stayed. The circle talked about identity and belonging, and Micah listened, his contributions small but sincere. Afterward, walking with Emmanuel through Brooklyn streets, they grabbed street tacos and talked about dreams deferred. Micah revealed the college friendship that ended in silence, the nights he had wondered if he was broken. Emmanuel's response was gentle, affirming that questions were the start of answers. The bond strengthened through shared silences and honest exchanges, Micah's guarded heart opening inch by inch. A weekend trip to visit the center's new outreach site in Queens turned into an all-day adventure, laughter mixing with serious talks about societal change. Micah began volunteering quietly, helping with financial literacy sessions, the work filling a void he had ignored. But home brought reminders. His sister called from Texas, probing about his single status and hinting at blind dates. The weight of expectations pressed harder. One night, alone with a glass of bourbon, Micah stared at an old photo of his college self and the friend he had lost. The pink envelope from that first day still sat in a drawer, a reminder that avoidance had limits. Emmanuel texted an invitation for a hike in the Hudson Valley, a break from city pressures. Micah agreed, the decision marking another step into unknown territory. As they walked trails lined with autumn colors, conversation turned to future plans and personal growth. Micah felt the pull of possibility, a warmth in Emmanuel's presence that challenged every old fear. The hike ended with a quiet promise to keep building whatever this was becoming. Back in New York, Micah faced another client loss, the fallout forcing him to confront how his past prejudices had isolated him. The internal crisis deepened, but so did his resolve to understand the man he was becoming. The hike had left Micah with a clarity he both craved and feared. Days blurred into a rhythm of work, center visits, and late-night talks with Emmanuel that stretched his understanding of connection. They met for coffee after a long day, Emmanuel sharing updates on the youth programs, while Micah offered business advice that felt meaningful for once. The attraction simmered beneath the surface, unspoken but present in lingering glances and easy silences. Micah caught himself smiling at texts from Emmanuel, a lightness he had not known in years. Yet the outside world pushed back harder. At the office, a colleague cornered him in the break room, voice low with suspicion. "People are saying you're getting too close to that Rivera guy. Careful, Thompson. It could look like more than charity." The words hit like a warning shot, stirring old panic. Micah denied it sharply, but the seed of doubt planted itself. That evening, he canceled a planned dinner with Emmanuel, citing work, but the guilt followed him home. He paced his apartment, replaying every interaction, questioning if his growing feelings were visible to others. Family pressure escalated when his father announced a surprise visit to New York for business. Micah prepared the guest room with dread, stocking the fridge with familiar Texas staples while hiding any trace of the center brochures. The reunion started tense, his father grilling him about work and personal life over steak at a downtown grill. "You seem distracted, son. That city changing you." Micah deflected, but the conversation turned to values, his father recounting stories of strong men who stayed the course. The words echoed Micah's old self, yet now they rang false against the growth he had experienced. Emmanuel sensed the distance and suggested a low-key lunch to talk. They met at a quiet cafe, where Micah finally voiced the work rumors and family visit. Emmanuel listened with empathy, sharing his own experiences with scrutiny. Their hands brushed accidentally over the table, sending a spark through Micah that he could no longer ignore. The moment passed, but the understanding lingered. Back at the center later that week, Micah helped organize a financial workshop, his expertise earning respect from the teens and staff alike. Emmanuel watched with quiet pride, their partnership evolving into something deeper. The betrayal came unexpectedly at a firm happy hour. A rival colleague, jealous of Micah's recent promotions, spread whispers about his new friends and implied conflicts of interest. The boss pulled Micah aside the next morning, demanding explanations. Micah defended the work passionately, citing real impact numbers, but the doubt in his superior's eyes stung. He left the meeting shaken, heading straight to the center where Emmanuel was coaching a group. Seeing the calm focus there grounded him. Over a walk afterward, Micah confessed the workplace storm, and Emmanuel offered support without pushing. The growing closeness culminated in a quiet evening at Emmanuel's apartment, sharing takeout and stories from their pasts. Micah opened up about the college betrayal that had locked his heart, tears surprising him as he spoke. Emmanuel held space for the pain, his presence a steady anchor. No grand gestures, just authentic connection that felt like home. Micah left that night with a resolve to face the rumors head-on. The next day, he confronted the colleague directly, asserting his choices without apology. The act lifted a weight, but family dinner with his father loomed, promising more tests. Micah knew the path forward would demand courage he was only beginning to find. His father's visit peaked during a tense family-style dinner at Micah's apartment. The older man arrived with questions about Micah's recent associations, having heard from Texas contacts about the center involvement. Conversation turned heated when Micah defended the work, describing the real lives changed by the programs. His father slammed a fist on the table. "This isn't you, son. Pink ribbons and rainbow talk? What happened to the boy I raised?" The words cut deep, reopening old wounds of expectation and silence. Micah stood his ground, voice steady for the first time. "Maybe the boy grew up, Dad. Maybe I finally see what matters." The argument spilled into the night, father leaving with disappointment heavy in the air. Alone, Micah called Emmanuel, voice cracking as he recounted the fight. Emmanuel arrived within the hour, offering silent company on the balcony as the city lights blurred below. They talked until dawn, Micah's tears flowing freely as years of suppressed identity surfaced. Emmanuel's quiet strength helped him name the fear he had carried, the love he had denied himself. In that vulnerable space, Micah realized the sponsorship mistake had been the gift he never knew he needed. Work fallout followed swiftly. The board demanded a meeting, citing client losses and image concerns. Micah prepared a presentation highlighting the financial and social returns from the partnership, but nerves rattled him. Emmanuel rehearsed with him the night before, role-playing tough questions with patience. At the meeting, Micah spoke from the heart, linking business success to authentic community ties. The board listened, some nodding, but the vote to continue support hung in balance. Micah left uncertain, but empowered by his truth. A public fundraiser at the center became the turning point. Emmanuel asked Micah to speak briefly about the sponsorship's impact. Standing before donors and youth, Micah's hands trembled at first. Then he saw Emmanuel's encouraging nod and launched into his story, honest about his initial hatred and the transformation that followed. The room fell silent, then erupted in applause. Micah stepped down feeling exposed yet free, the weight of years lifting. Later, in a private corner, Emmanuel pulled him into a brief embrace. Words of pride whispered that sealed their bond. Family reconciliation came slowly. His father called days later, voice softer, admitting he had watched a video of the speech. "I don't understand it all, son, but I see you're happy." Micah invited him to visit the center, a small step toward bridging worlds. The visit went better than expected, his father meeting the teens and hearing stories that challenged his views. Micah and Emmanuel walked the skyline path afterward, hands brushing in the open for the first time, the city witnessing their quiet commitment. The sacrifices had cost clients and strained ties, but the rewards reshaped Micah entirely. He restructured his role at the firm to include more outreach, turning fear into purpose. Nights with Emmanuel brought conversations about futures, shared dreams of building a life without hiding. The internal awakening complete, Micah stood taller, the man who once tore pink envelopes now cherishing the symbol that had set him free. Months passed in a rhythm of shared routines and deepening trust. Micah and Emmanuel traveled together to a youth conference in Chicago, where Emmanuel presented and Micah networked for expanded funding. The trip solidified their partnership, late evenings in the hotel room filled with laughter and plans for the future. Back in New York, Micah introduced Emmanuel to close friends at a small gathering, the acceptance he received easing old worries. Work stabilized as new clients valued the authentic community focus, proving growth and success could align. Family ties mended further when his sister visited, embracing both men with open arms and stories of her own evolving views. Micah's father sent a card for the holidays, simple words of pride that meant everything. The center thrived with increased support, Emmanuel's vision expanding programs that Micah helped finance strategically. Their relationship grew through everyday moments. Cooking dinners, weekend hikes, quiet support during tough days. No fanfare, just steady love built on understanding and choice. Micah reflected often on the pink envelope that started it all, now framed in his office as a reminder of unintended paths leading to truth. He volunteered weekly, mentoring young men navigating similar fears, his story offering hope. Emmanuel watched with quiet joy, their bond a testament to courage found in vulnerability. One evening on the same rooftop where their friendship began, Micah turned to Emmanuel under the stars. "I was so afraid of what those envelopes meant. Now I see they led me to you." Emmanuel smiled, pulling him close. "Sometimes the things we fear most become the ones that save us." The year closed with a community event honoring their joint efforts, Micah speaking openly about his journey from denial to acceptance. The applause echoed the internal cheers he finally allowed himself. Life in New York felt expansive, the skyline no longer a cage but a canvas for possibility. Their story continued, not without challenges, but with the strength of choices made and fears faced. Micah had become the man he once could not imagine, living openly and loving fully. The pink envelopes still arrived, but now he opened them with anticipation, each one a symbol of the life he had chosen.